Hello, today we're going to be starting the unit on the muscular system. Today we're going to be focusing in on particular muscle tissue. Now, when we talk about muscle, I want you to be aware that there's about hundreds of different muscle cells that make up one muscle. So we need to talk about the basics of the tissue. As far as muscle tissue goes, it is specialized to contract. When a muscle cell pulls on the collagen fibers, that is going to create a tension. That is going to allow for us to move. It's going to give us some muscle tone. It's going to help propel bodily fluids and food throughout our body. It's going to generate the heartbeat, and it's going to distribute heat. Now, there are three types of muscle tissue. We have skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. We're going to be focusing primarily on the skeletal muscle, the muscle that actually moves us or the bones of our body. The cardiac muscle is going to be surrounding the heart, and it's going to help with the heartbeat and push the blood around the body. And the smooth muscle is going to be surrounding different organs, and that's going to help, again, propel food or different functions depending on the organ that it is surrounding. When we talk about smooth muscle, we say it's smooth because it does not have striations or lines. Cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle both have striations, or they have lines that go throughout. In addition to the lines, cardiac muscles have intercalated discs. These discs intertwine to adjacent cells, and that allows for the electrical conduction that happens in the heart. Because of these intercalated discs, the contraction will last about 10 times longer than the skeletal muscle. Now, as far as the structure goes of the cardiac muscle, they're small. They do not have cisternae. And again, these are all terms that we're going to be learning about in a little bit. Smooth muscle is also small, a little smaller than the cardiac. It's about 5 to 10 micrometers, where cardiac muscle is about 10 to 20 micrometers. All right. The cells are a little bit more spindle shaped. It does have a nucleus. It doesn't have the transverse tubules, fibrils, or sarcomeres as we see in skeletal muscle. And the thick filaments are going to be scattered throughout the sarcoplasm or the cytoplasm of the smooth muscle cell. So those are all terms that we're going to find in a skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, again, these are big cells. These are about 10 to 100 millimeters wide, and they could reach about 30 centimeters in length. They are going to be attached to bones, and they're going to be functioning in moving our skeleton, helping us with posture, body position, support, protection. It's going to be guarding entrance and exits, and it's going to help maintain the body temperature. Now, just so you know, motor neurons attach directly to this muscle, which is going to be controlled by spinal reflex, which is consciously controlled for us. The skeletal muscle contains connective tissue, 3 different layers: epimyosin, perimyosin, and endomyosin, and we're going to learn that in a minute. It's going to have blood vessels and nerves, and these are going to be found in the connective tissue layers of the epimyosin and the perimyosin, and obviously skeletal muscle tissue. Now, the contracting muscles takes a lot of energies, so we need a lot of blood supply, a lot of vascular network, so we can supply the muscles with a lot of oxygen and nutrients. So if you see here, these are a lot of the terms I've been talking about. The aponeurosis is a broad band, and that in particular is a tendon. So the muscle is going to be attaching to the bone through the aponeurosis. And you can see that we have different layers. Connective tissue, I had said, was the epimyosin, the perimyosin, and the endomyosin. You can see that the fascicle actually wraps around the different muscle fibers, and we do have endomyosin inside. Now, it does have the blood vessels and the nerves that go along with the blood supply bringing the oxygen and the nerves to generate that reflex to move the body. So this is a lot of terminology. And we're going to be focusing in on this in class. We're going to be working with diagrams and looking at the different pictures to learn all this. The fascia is a layer of fibrous connective tissue that's going to surround the muscle. Aponeurosis is a broad fibrous sheet, like a tendon that attaches bone or other muscles. The epimysin is a layer of connective tissue that surrounds the skeletal muscle. It's a very dense layer of collagen fibers, and that's going to surround the entire muscle. The perimysin is layers of connective tissue that extend inward from the epimysin. It's going to actually separate the muscle tissue into small compartments or bundles. So it kind of wraps the bundles of the cells together. Now, the fascicle is a whole bundle of skeletal muscle fibers, and the endomysin is a thin covering that surrounds the fascicle. So this is what's going to wrap the individual cells. Now, in the endomysin, we do have what are called satellite cells, and they are going to be helping in repair and maintenance. All right. So at the end of the muscle, all of the connective tissues intertwine and become that broad band or the tendon or the aponeurosis. And you can see there the picture of everything. Okay, so the endomysin is going to surround the muscle cell. A bunch of muscle cells have a fascicle around it. There is the perimysin that then does surround the fascicles. We do have bloods and nerves that surround. We do have the epimysin that surrounds the whole thing, and fascia is going to be like a thin covering that's going to surround it, and then it will attach to the bone through the tendon or the aponeurosis. So some characteristics about skeletal muscles. They're single cells. They are almost cylindrical with a little bit of rounded ends. They can be, again, big. I said 10 to 100 millimeters wide. They have hundreds of these myoblasts, which are embryonic cells that fuse together, and sometimes they do remain inside of the muscle as the satellite cells. The whole function of the skeletal muscle is to contract and relax when we get a stimulus. Again, remember that there's a motor neuron that is going to be attached there. Now, we always talk about the cell membrane of a cell. Well, a cell membrane of a muscle cell is called the sarcolemma. The cytoplasm is now called the sarcoplasm. Now, the skeletal muscle fibers has tons of nuclei, and it has tons of mitochondria. Remember, mitochondria is what gives the energy, okay? And it does contain the myofibrils, and I'll explain that in a minute. Now, the sarcoplasm of the muscle cell contains the pigment myoglobin, which is red. It's an oxygen-storing pigment, and that's what's responsible for that reddish-brown color of meat. So I said that they contain myofibrils. Myofibrils are about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, and they kind of run the length of the cell, and they lie parallel to each other. This is so important in muscle contraction, and we'll talk about that in our next video. Now, they do contain different proteins. They're called thin and thick filaments. The thick filament is made up of myosin, and the thin filaments is made up of the proteins actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. Now, we said that there were striations or the lines. This is all because the thin and thick filaments are going to alternate, and it kind of gives an alternating light and dark band appearance. So we had said that the sarcolemma was the cell membrane, the sarcoplasm was the cytoplasm. Now we have the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is just like the ER, very membranous channels that's going to surround the myofibril. Transverse tubules are called T-tubules, and they extend inward and pass all the way through the fiber. This is where the extracellular fluid is, and it's going to lie between the cisternae, which is in a large portion, of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. All right, the transverse tubules have those invaginations of the sarcolemma or the cell membrane, and that's going to penetrate deep into the cell, and it's going to be perpendicular to that sarcoplasmic reticulum or the ER. So you can see here the alternating light and dark bands. Again, the light bands are thin filaments, which is actin, troponin, or tropomyosin, and the darker bands are the thick filaments, which is the myosin. You can see there, again, the sarcolemma is the cell membrane. There's many mitochondria. You can see the cisternae is the ends of the rounded portion, large portion of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. You can see that there's the T tubules that go all the way down in there. Now, I do want to explain to you what a sarcomere is. Now, a sarcomere is so important in muscle cells. This is the smallest contractile unit of a muscle cell. One myofibril is made up of about 10,000 sarcomeres. So it's pretty immense as far as numbers. Now, there's a different terminology. And again, this is a lot of vocab that we'll keep reviewing with diagrams. The A bands are the dark bands, and dark would mean thick, and that would mean myosin. In the A bands, there are some overlap between the thin filaments. Now, the I bands is the light band. So this is thin filaments, primarily actin. Now, this is going to be attached to the Z line. A Z line is what's found in the middle of an I band. A Z line to Z line is what one sarcomere is going to be called. So the Z line is where the thin filaments are cross-connected. Now, the H zone is found in the middle of the A band or the dark band, and it's only going to be seen in relaxed muscle. Now, the M line is found in the middle, so M for middle of the H zone. And this is an area where the thick filaments are cross-connected. And it's going to have proteins that help hold those thick filaments in place. So you can see here that the I band is thin. Okay, A band is dark. You will see the H zone in the relaxed muscles. Okay. Now, when you see this, there's a lot of cross overlapping. Okay. So the thick filaments can overlap with the thin filaments. The Z line is found right in the middle of the I bands, and Z line to Z line is going to be one sarcomere. This is just showing you a little bit of a cross section of what it looks like. Now, we're going to be reviewing all of this in class. We're going to be working on a lot of diagrams. So all of this terminology is going to become very familiar. Please write down any questions that you have and let me know, and then we will go over anything you need to in class. Have a great day.